Hello, I'm Ethan Lau, 31 years old, and I'm a web developer living in Seattle, Washington. A city that's not too crowded, just modern enough to feel the pulse of innovation, yet traditional enough to make you want to pause, take a deep breath, and reflect. My home is in Capitol Hill, a compact one-bedroom apartment just right for a single guy like me. I'm not one to ramble about my life, but since you're here, I'll tell you my story. A story that begins with family expectations and ends with truths no one could have foreseen. I grew up in a family that, to outsiders, looked like the picture of immigrant success. My mother, Julia Lau, was the quintessential tiger mom, always bustling around making sure everyone knew how well her sons were doing. My father worked in accounting, steady and reliable. And then there was Nathan, my older brother, 4 years my senior, the golden child of the family, treated like a precious gem from the moment he was born, destined for Wall Street greatness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. And me? I was Ethan, the web developer, the one who settled for a $50,000 salary and a quiet life building websites for small businesses. The one my parents thought didn't need attention because he'll figure it out on his own. But being independent doesn't mean you don't crave recognition. Some nights I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I was always pushed to the sidelines. Every Sunday, without fail, my phone would buzz with the family video call. Mom's face would fill the screen, her smile bright but strained. "Ethan, you look thin." "Are you eating enough?" she'd ask, then immediately pivot to Nathan's latest conquest on Wall Street. "Your brother just closed a 7-figure deal. When are you going to think bigger?" Nathan would join from his Manhattan apartment, all expensive suits and practiced charm. "Hey, little brother, still coding away? You know, I have connections who could get you into fintech. Real money, not this freelance stuff." I'd force a smile and deflect. "I'm doing fine. I like what I do." But they never heard the contentment in my voice. They only heard the number 50,000 and saw failure. The person who understood me was Nai Nai Lin, my maternal grandmother. She lived in a small apartment above her tea house in Chinatown, a world away from my family's suburban ambitions. I'd visit her every few weeks, sitting on her worn wooden floor, while she made sesame buns, and told me stories about Hong Kong, about starting over in America, about the importance of staying curious. "Money is just paper, Ethan," she'd say in her accented English mixed with Mandarin. "But stories live forever." I was debugging code on a gray October afternoon when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. "Is this Ethan Lau?" "I'm calling about your grandmother, Lin Wei. I'm sorry to inform you that she passed away peacefully in her sleep last night." The words hit me like a physical blow. Nai Nai was gone. When I called my family, their response was predictably dismissive. "Well, she didn't have much anyway," Mom said. "At least she won't be a burden anymore." I hung up, staring at my reflection in the black computer screen, feeling more alone than ever. 3 days after Nai Nai's funeral, a crisp white envelope arrived in my mailbox. The return address read, "Mendez and Associates Estate Law," in elegant script. Inside was a letter requesting my presence at the reading of Lin Wei's will, along with my parents. My stomach churned as I called Mom to tell her about the appointment. "A will reading for what?" she scoffed. "Your grandmother lived in that tiny apartment for 30 years. She probably left behind some old furniture and maybe a few $100s in savings." I didn't argue, but something about the formal letterhead suggested otherwise. The law office was downtown, sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. When I arrived, Mom and Dad were already seated in leather chairs, whispering to each other. Nathan had flown in from New York, looking polished in his charcoal suit, checking his phone with the air of someone who had more important places to be. Veronica Mendez entered the room with quiet authority, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a thick manila folder in what looked like an ornate wooden box. "Thank you all for coming," she said, settling behind her desk. "I understand this is a difficult time." Lin Wei was a remarkable woman, and she was very specific about how she wanted her affairs handled. Mom shifted impatiently. "Ms. Mendez, we appreciate you handling this, but honestly, we don't expect there's much to distribute. My mother lived very simply." Veronica smiled, an expression that seemed to hold secrets. "Mrs. Lau, I think you might be surprised." She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "Your mother's estate includes her personal effects, her apartment, and the commercial building housing Lin's House of Stories and Teas in Chinatown." "Building?" Dad leaned forward. "I thought she just rented that space." "She purchased it in 1987, Veronica continued, along with making several other investments over the years. The total value of the estate is approximately $5.2 million. The room fell silent. Nathan's phone clattered to the floor. Mom's face went pale, then flushed red. I felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and strange. $5 million? Nathan finally managed. "Grandma was sitting on $5 million? Veronica nodded. "And according to her will, she's leaving the entirety of her estate to one person." She looked directly at me. "Ethan Lau." The explosion was immediate. Mom shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "That's impossible! She can't leave everything to him and nothing to the rest of us." "Mom, please," I said, but my voice came out as a whisper. Nathan's charming facade cracked. "There has to be some mistake. Ethan, you have to share this with the family. It's only right." But Veronica was already sliding documents across the desk to me. Bank statements, property deeds, and finally, the wooden box. "This was specifically marked for Ethan only," she said. "Your grandmother left instructions that you were to receive it immediately upon her death." My hands trembled as I touched the box. It was heavier than I expected, carved with intricate patterns that seemed familiar somehow. There was a small brass nameplate on top that read, "Stories are the only inheritance that matters." "Ethan," Mom's voice cracked with emotion I'd never heard before, "you can't seriously be considering keeping all of this for yourself. Think about your family. Think about Nathan's future." But I was thinking about Nai-Nai's words. Stories live forever. I stood up, the box clutched against my chest, and walked toward the door. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone had truly seen me. The keys felt cold in my palm as I stood before the narrow building in Chinatown. The faded sign above the door read, "Lin's House of Stories and Teas," in both English and Chinese characters, though the paint was peeling and one of the windows was cracked. I'd walked past this place countless times as a child, but now it was mine. The door creaked open to reveal a space frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light filtering through grimy windows. Round tables were scattered throughout the room, each one surrounded by mismatched chairs. Along the walls, built-in bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with volumes in English, Chinese, and what looked like several other languages. The air smelled of old paper and jasmine tea, a scent that transported me instantly back to childhood visits. "You must be Ethan." The voice came from behind me, soft but steady. I turned to see an elderly Chinese man emerging from the shadows near the back of the room. He was small and wiry, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold decades of stories. "I'm Mr. Chen," he said, extending a weathered hand. "I've been taking care of this place since your grandmother became too ill to manage it herself." "I didn't know she was sick," I admitted, feeling a pang of guilt. Mr. Chen's expression softened. "She didn't want to worry you, but she spoke of you often. She said you were the only one who understood what this place meant." I looked around the room again, seeing it through new eyes. This wasn't just a business, it was a sanctuary. She never told me she owned the building. "Your grandmother was a private woman. She believed in showing love through actions, not words." Mr. Chen gestured toward the bookshelves. "She collected these books for 40 years, stories from every culture, every generation. She said stories were the only way to truly understand someone." My fingers traced the spine of a worn children's book, and suddenly I remembered sitting in this very spot at age 10, reading comics while Nai prepared tea for customers. She'd bring me sesame buns and tell me about the authors whose books surrounded us. "What happened to the customers?" I asked. "They stopped coming when she closed 5 years ago, but the neighborhood remembers. They're waiting." That evening, in my apartment, I finally opened the wooden box. Inside was a carefully folded letter, written in Nai's distinctive handwriting. My hands shook as I read. "My dearest Ethan, if you are reading this, then I have gone to join your grandfather. I know your family will not understand why I chose you, but you were the only one who saw the tea house as more than just a business. You saw it as a home for stories, a place where people could find pieces of themselves. The money will help you restore what time has damaged, but the real inheritance is your ability to see what others cannot. The world needs more people like you, my grandson. Make this place live again." I set the letter down and stared out my window at the city lights, feeling the weight of her trust settling on my shoulders like a warm blanket. I returned to the tea house the next morning, carrying the wooden box and a thermos of coffee. Mr. Chen was already there, sweeping dust from the front steps with methodical precision. He nodded at me without surprise, as if he'd expected I would come back. Inside the box, beneath the first letter, I found 6 more envelopes, each marked with a different year spanning from 1965 to 2019. I opened the second one, dated 1973, and Nai's voice filled the empty room through her careful handwriting. "I came to America with nothing but stories and stubbornness," she had written. "Your mother was only 5 then, frightened of the new sounds and smells. I worked in restaurant kitchens for 12 hours a day, saving every penny. When the landlord tried to raise our rent by 300%, I knew I had to own something that no one could take away." The letter described how she'd scrubbed floors at night to earn extra money, how she'd learned English by reading discarded newspapers, how she'd slowly, quietly built a life from nothing. By the time I finished reading, my coffee had gone cold. My phone buzzed. Nathan's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, little brother? Listen, I've been thinking about your situation. That's a lot of money to manage on your own. I could help you invest it properly, make it grow. I know some people in real estate who could turn that building into serious cash flow. I'm not selling the building, Nathan." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. A pause. "Ethan, be realistic. What are you going to do with a rundown tea shop? You're a web developer, not a restaurateur. Let me help you make smart choices." After I hung up, a text from Mom appeared. "Your brother is only trying to help. Don't let pride make you selfish." Pride? I laughed bitterly and opened the third letter, dated 1987. This one was shorter, but more intense. "Today, I bought the building." The banker looked at me like I was crazy. A Chinese woman wanting to own property in Chinatown. But I had saved for 14 years, and I knew exactly what I wanted. This place will be more than a business. It will be a bridge between worlds, where stories from the old country can live alongside new ones. I found myself walking upstairs to what had been Nai's apartment. Dust covers shrouded the furniture, but I could see the care she'd put into every detail. Family photos lined a small shelf, including one that made me stop breathing. Me at 10 years old, sitting cross-legged on the tea house floor, completely absorbed in a comic book, while she smiled at me from behind the counter. Below the photo was a handwritten note, the only one who understands that happiness doesn't always come with a price tag. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Liam, my old friend from high school. "Heard about your grandma. Want to grab a beer and talk?" For the first time in days, I smiled. "Actually, want to see something amazing instead?" Liam arrived at the tea house wearing his usual paint-stained jeans and a genuine smile that reminded me why we'd been friends for 20 years. He was Korean-American, a barista by day and muralist by night, someone who understood the weight of family expectations without letting them crush his spirit. "Holy shit, Ethan," he whispered, taking in the dusty shelves and faded elegance. "This place is incredible. I can feel the history in the walls. I was showing him the collection of handwritten recipes behind the counter when my phone rang. Nathan's voice carried that forced cheerfulness he used when he was about to ask for something big. "Great news, little brother. I have someone who wants to meet you. James Morrison, a real estate developer I know from the club. He's very interested in your property." "Nathan, I told you I'm not. Just hear him out. He's offering to meet this afternoon. No pressure, just a conversation." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Morrison arrived in a Tesla, all polished shoes and practiced handshakes. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of aggressive confidence that made me immediately uncomfortable. "This is prime real estate," he said, walking through the tea house without really seeing it. "Great bones, fantastic location. I'm thinking luxury condos, maybe some high-end retail on the ground floor. Very modern, very clean." "It's already a tea house," I said quietly. He laughed. "Sure, but that's not maximizing the potential. I can offer you $6.5 million, cash, closing in 30 days. That's well above market value." Liam caught my eye and shook his head almost imperceptibly. "I need time to think," I said. After Morrison left, Nathan called within minutes. "Ethan, this is an incredible opportunity. You could set yourself up for life." That evening, Mom called too. Her voice was strained, almost pleading. "Your brother is struggling more than he lets on. This money could save his firm, help our whole family. Think about what your grandmother would have wanted, family taking care of family." But when I opened the fourth letter that night, dated 1995, Nine-Eye's words seemed to speak directly to my situation. "A man came today wanting to buy the building. He offered twice what I paid, but his eyes were hungry, empty. He saw only profit where I see sanctuary. If someone ever comes to you with gold in their eyes, remember this. Once you sell your soul, you can never buy it back." I set the letter down and called Liam. "I need your help with something. Want to learn how to restore a tea house." His laugh was warm and immediate. "I thought you'd never ask." The family dinner was supposed to be a celebration of my inheritance. Mom had made her signature pot roast. The dining room table was set with the good china, and Nathan had flown in from New York, specifically for the occasion. But I could feel the tension crackling in the air the moment I walked through the front door. "So," Dad said, carving the roast with surgical precision, "have you given more thought to Mr. Morrison's offer?" "I turned it down," I said quietly, taking a bite of mashed potatoes that suddenly tasted like sawdust. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down with shaking hands. "You what?" Nathan's voice was controlled, but I could see the vein in his temple starting to throb. "I'm not selling the building. I'm going to restore the tea house." Mom stood up so quickly her chair almost toppled backward. "Ethan, you cannot be serious. You're going to throw away $6.5 million to play tea shop owner?" "It's not playing, Mom. It's honoring what Nine-Eye built. Your grandmother was stubborn and foolish." The words exploded out of her with a force that made us all flinch. She chose that dusty old building over her own family. She cut us out of her life because we wanted her to be practical, to think about the future. "Maybe she cut you out because you never understood what mattered to her," I shot back, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. Nathan leaned forward, his Wall Street composure finally cracking. "Ethan, you don't understand what's at stake here. My firm is hemorrhaging money. I've got investors breathing down my neck, debts I can't cover. This inheritance could save everything." "Your debts aren't my responsibility, Nathan." "Family is supposed to help family." His fist slammed against the table, making the water glasses jump. "I've been supporting you emotionally for years, covering for your mediocre career choices, and now when I need help, you're going to hoard grandmother's money like some selfish." "Supporting me?" I stood up, 26 years of buried resentment finally erupting. "You've never supported me. You've spent our entire lives making me feel like a failure because I chose happiness over money. You've mocked my salary, my choices, my life, and now you want me to bail you out." "Don't you dare talk to your brother that way," Dad said sternly. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. And where were you when he was tearing me down? Where were any of you when I needed support? I had to find it from an 80-year-old woman who made me sesame buns and told me stories because my own parents were too busy worshiping Nathan's success to notice I existed. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We always loved you, Ethan. We just wanted you to reach your potential. No, I said, my voice breaking. You wanted me to be Nathan. But I'm not Nathan. I never was. And Nai was the only person who saw that as a good thing. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Mom crying softly into her napkin. If you go through with this tea house nonsense, Nathan said quietly, his voice cold as winter, don't expect any help from this family when it fails. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair. I've never expected help from this family, Nathan. That's the difference between us. I walked out into the October night, my breath forming clouds in the cold air, and drove straight back to Chinatown, back to the place where someone had finally chosen me. The next morning, I stood in the tea house holding a cup of coffee and a notebook, trying to figure out where to begin. The enormity of the task felt overwhelming until Mr. Chen appeared at the door, carrying a toolbox and wearing a small smile. Every journey begins with a single step, he said in accented English. Your grandmother taught me that. Liam arrived an hour later with paint samples and an infectious energy that made everything feel possible. I've been thinking about this all night, he said, spreading sketches across one of the dusty tables. What if we honored the original design but brought it into the present? Keep the soul, update the comfort. Over the next 3 weeks, the tea house became our second home. We stripped away decades of neglect, revealing the beautiful bones beneath. The hardwood floors, once hidden under worn carpet, gleamed honey gold when we refinished them. The built-in bookshelves, after careful cleaning and repair, stood ready to hold their stories again. Mr. Chen worked with the quiet efficiency of someone who had maintained the space for years. He showed me where Nai had hidden spare keys, which floorboard creaked in just the right way, how the ancient espresso machine could still make perfect shots if you knew its temperamental personality. She always said this machine had moods like a person, he told me, coaxing it to life with practiced hands. Some days it sang, some days it grumbled, but it never failed to make good coffee. Liam painted a mural on the back wall, working from stories I shared about Nai. Cherry blossoms flowed into urban skylines, traditional Chinese characters blended with English poetry, and in the center, a small figure of an elderly woman serving tea to people of all ages and backgrounds. As word spread through the neighborhood, something unexpected happened. People started stopping by. Mrs. Wu from the herb shop brought homemade dumplings. The young couple from the corner market offered to help with electrical work. Even teenagers from the local high school showed up, curious about the renovation. Your grandmother fed my son free soup when we had no money, Mrs. Wu told me in broken English, tears in her eyes. She never forgot anyone's story. On a quiet evening, while Liam and Mr. Chen debated teacup arrangements, I found another envelope hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace. This letter was different, newer, dated just 6 months ago. Nai's handwriting was shakier, but her words were clear. My dearest Ethan, if you have found this letter, it means you chose to stay. You chose the harder path, the one that leads not to easy money, but to meaningful work. This building has been waiting for you to bring it back to life. The neighborhood needs a place where stories can flourish again. I hid one final surprise behind the loose stone in the garden wall. Use it to make this place everything it was meant to be. The next morning, behind the stone she'd mentioned, I found a metal box containing old photographs of the tea house in its prime, packed with customers, alive with laughter and conversation. Clipped to the photos was a bank account number and a note, for when dreams need funding. The account held another $100,000. Standing in the nearly restored tea house, surrounded by friends who believed in the vision, I finally understood what Nai had been trying to tell me. This wasn't about money or even family. This was about creating something lasting, something that mattered. Ready for the grand opening? Liam asked, stepping back to admire his finished mural. I nodded, feeling more ready than I'd ever been for anything in my life. I was hanging the new sign above the tea house entrance when Veronica Mendez called. Her voice was tense, professional but concerned. "Ethan, we need to talk. Your brother has filed a legal challenge to your inheritance." My stomach dropped. "What kind of challenge?" "He's claiming your grandmother was mentally incapacitated when she made the will and that you exercised undue influence over her. It's a long shot, but he's hired an expensive firm. They're trying to freeze your assets pending the outcome." I sat down heavily on the front steps, watching Mr. Chen arrange new tea canisters in the window. 3 months of work, 3 months of hope, and Nathan was trying to destroy it with paperwork. "How long could this take?" I asked. "Months, maybe years. And Ethan, fighting this will be expensive. He's counting on you not having the resources for a prolonged legal battle." That evening, I stared at my laptop screen, cursor blinking in an empty document. Liam found me there an hour later, still frozen. "What's wrong?" he asked, settling beside me on the couch. I told him about the lawsuit, about Nathan's strategy to bleed me dry with legal fees. Maybe I should just settle, give him half and be done with it. Liam was quiet for a long moment. Then, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a worn envelope. "I found this in the mural supplies. It was tucked behind one of Nai's old canvases." Inside was another letter, this one addressed to both of us. "Ethan and friend," it began. "If you are reading this together, it means you have found someone who sees your vision. The world will try to convince you that money is more important than meaning, that family obligation matters more than personal truth. But your strength has always been quiet. It doesn't roar like thunder. It moves mountains, one stone at a time." I looked up at Liam, feeling something shift inside me. She knew. She knew they'd try to stop me. "So what are you going to do?" I opened my laptop and started typing. Not a legal document or a settlement offer, but a video script. If Nathan wanted to make this public, I'd give him public. 2 days later, I posted the video on YouTube, Why I'm Fighting to Save My Grandmother's Legacy. I told the whole story. Nathan's financial troubles, my family's pressure to sell, Nai's letters, and what the tea house really meant to the community. The response was overwhelming. Local news stations picked up the story. The Seattle Times ran a feature about gentrification and cultural preservation. Most importantly, the neighborhood rallied. Mrs. Wu started a crowdfunding campaign for legal expenses. The high school students organized a protest march. Even strangers began showing up, offering support, and sharing their own stories about family pressure and following dreams. Within a week, the video had 50,000 views and comments from around the world. People shared stories about their own grandparents, their own family businesses lost to development, their own struggles to choose meaning over money. Nathan called me, his voice strained. "You're making this personal, Ethan, making me look like the villain. You made it personal when you tried to steal what Nai left me. I'm not stealing anything. I'm trying to save our family." "No, Nathan. You're trying to save yourself. There's a difference." A week later, Veronica called with news. The judge reviewed the evidence. "Your grandmother's will is ironclad. Multiple witnesses, regular mental health evaluations, even video testimony recorded months before her death. Nathan's case has no merit." But the real victory came the next day. Mom called, her voice thick with tears. "I saw your video," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about what you said, about Nai, about us." For the first time in my adult life, my mother apologized. "I don't know if you can forgive me, Ethan, but I want to understand. I want to see what she saw in you." I looked out the window at the tea house, where Mr. Chen was teaching a group of kids how to arrange flowers for the grand opening. "Come to the opening next week, Mom. See for yourself." The morning of the grand opening, I stood in the center of the restored tea house and felt Nai's presence as surely as if she were standing beside me. The space hummed with life again, bookshelves filled with stories in a dozen languages, mismatched chairs that invited conversation, and the gentle aroma of jasmine and Earl Grey floating through the air. Mr. Chen emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray of fresh sesame buns, the same recipe Nai had perfected decades ago. She would be proud, he said simply, setting the tray on the counter where she used to work. By noon, a line stretched around the block. Mrs. Wu brought her entire extended family. The high school students who had helped with the renovation arrived with homemade banners. Local reporters mingled with neighborhood regulars, all drawn by the promise of something authentic in an increasingly manufactured world. But the moment that took my breath away was when I saw Mom walking through the door, hesitant but determined. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small wrapped box. Behind her, looking deeply uncomfortable but present nonetheless, was Dad. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft. "This place is beautiful." I watched her take in Liam's mural, the carefully restored shelves, the photographs of the tea house through the decades that we'd hung along the walls. Her eyes stopped on one particular photo, a young version of herself, maybe 20 years old, sitting at one of these same tables with Nai. "I used to come here when you were little," she whispered, "before everything got so complicated between us." She handed me the wrapped box. Inside was a small jade bracelet, delicate and obviously old. "This was your great-grandmother's. Nai left it to me when I got married, but I think she would want you to have it now, for the tea house." As the afternoon progressed, I found myself moving through the crowd, listening to stories. An elderly man told me about reading his first English book at this very table in 1983. A young mother shared how Nai had given her free tea and advice during a difficult divorce. A teenager thanked me for creating a space where he could study without judgment. When the crowd finally settled, I stood near the counter where Nai had spent 40 years of her life. Liam squeezed my shoulder encouragingly as I cleared my throat. "My grandmother believed that everyone has a story worth telling," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the packed room. "She created this place not just to serve tea, but to serve as a bridge between generations, between cultures, between the stories we inherit and the ones we choose to write." I looked directly at Mom, then continued. "This isn't just a tea house, it's a house of stories. And every single person who walks through that door adds to the collection." The applause that followed was warm and genuine, but what mattered most was the sight of Mom wiping tears from her eyes, finally understanding what her mother had built and what I had chosen to preserve. 6 months after the grand opening, I sat in the quiet tea house at closing time, reading the final letter from Nai's collection. This one was different, written just weeks before her death, and marked simply, "Your future." "My dearest Ethan," it began, "if you are reading this, it means you chose the difficult path. You chose meaning over money, community over comfort. I always knew you would find your way. Not because you were perfect, but because you were brave enough to be yourself." Liam was across the room, updating the community board where people left notes and stories for others to find. In the corner, 2 teenagers worked on homework while sharing a pot of oolong tea. This was exactly what Nai had envisioned, a living, breathing space where stories intersected and lives were enriched. "The inheritance was never about the money," her letter continued. "It was about giving you the freedom to become who you were meant to be. The tea house needed someone who understood that some things are worth more than their price tag. But more than that, the world needs people like you, people who choose to build rather than tear down, who preserve rather than profit." I set the letter down and pulled out a fresh piece of paper. It was time to start a new tradition, a wall where visitors could write letters to the people who had shaped them. I began with my own. "Dear Nai, I understand now what you were trying to teach me. Success isn't measured in salary or status. It's measured in the lives you touch, the stories you preserve, the community you create. Thank you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." The front door chimed, and Mr. Chen entered carrying tomorrow's fresh flowers. At 72, he had become the unofficial grandfather of our little corner of Chinatown, teaching tea ceremonies to anyone interested, and sharing stories that connected past to present. "How was today?" he asked, beginning his evening ritual of arranging the flowers. "Good. Really good." I looked around the space that had become so much more than I'd ever imagined. Nai would be happy. Through the window, I could see Mom walking up the street. She'd started volunteering on weekends, helping with the children's reading program we'd established. Dad still struggled with my choices, but he was trying, bringing his accounting skills to help manage the books. Even Nathan had called last week, his voice subdued but genuine. His firm had folded, but he'd found work at a smaller company, earning less but sleeping better. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he'd said simply, "for everything." Liam finished with the community board and walked over, slipping his hand into mine. We'd been taking things slowly, building something real on the foundation of friendship and shared dreams. "Ready to head home?" he asked. I looked around one more time at the tea house, at the full bookshelves, the well-worn chairs, the mural that captured Nai's spirit so perfectly. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new stories, new connections between people who might otherwise never meet. "Yeah," I said, turning off the lights. "I'm ready." As we walked out into the Seattle evening, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to become someone else. I was exactly who I was meant to be. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.